Hi, y'all. This is Alex. I am our social media director, and we're having a conversation today with Alex Liu. Here he is.
Hey,
Awesome. How are you today?
good. How are you? Thanks for
I,
asking.
of course, we're so you. I know that our creative director Leela met you at Tallgrass Film Festival.
Yeah.
Loved your film, A Sexplanation. So we wanted to have you on today as our topic of the month is sex education in the United States, as it is. And yeah, I guess I'll start out by introing myself to your audience and then introing you to ours. So
Yeah,
that's
great.
okay. Well, I'm Alex Gambati. I am the social media director for rePROFilm. We are an advocacy and arts organization that produces a free digital monthly periodical that focuses on an element of reproductive health and justice. We curate a short film. We create an original podcast with Ashadaya, our moderator. And then Alex here, our guest today, was a health reporter turned YouTube channel developer turned New York Times Critic Pick recipient for his 2021 feature documentary, A Sexplanation, which explores comprehensive sex education in the United States. So
Yeah.
a lot of great. And I wanted to start us out by asking you why it's difficult to change sex ed policy in the United States, and in your research film, what you noticed as a common theme in our sex ed as it is.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to be as specific as possible because I think often when we say terms, even like what is sex, right? People's minds go in a lot of different places. So specifically, I think in the United States, unlike many other industrialized nations, school curriculum policy is set at the hyper local level, right? Even your city or town can have multiple school boards, and each school board has, mini hyper elections in which they decide what is taught and what isn't taught, not taught in your school. So you could have an example. So states will sometimes set guidelines, but the actual curricula is set by your school board. So it's really difficult. For better or worse, the system that we have allows, these kind of hyper, local issues to take, there's maybe some benefit, but it's difficult to get good comprehensive sex education across the US because of that. And I think, ultimately there's just this huge cultural uh, fear. I would say it's really just fear over, I, I would say it's like the sexualizing children. That's often the pushback you get. You hear, kind of the worst bad faith arguments are that sex ed is like it's grooming, or it's taught by pedophiles, or it's these kind of really disturbing kind of places our minds go in. And I think that just has to go from a deep cultural fear we have of pleasure, we have of our bodies, we have of sex in general. It's just so ingrained in the U.S. consciousness, the American cultural consciousness, that no school board member is ever gonna campaign on a platform that, like, we need to make sure kids realize masturbation is okay. That's
Right.
just that's a losing political campaign,
Hmm.
even though it's a message that I wish I had heard so much earlier. It would have caused me so much relief and anxiety that I still have today,
Right.
because I was so terrified of my own body and of pleasure and of sexual pleasure. So it's this thing where, things are changing fast. As a gay man, I did not expect us to get to this point in our history that we are, but I've just found that even the most quote unquote progressive liberal people, when you start talking about sex education for children, they get tense and nervous. And before I made the film, I was one of those people as well, so I get it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like what you've just mentioned led me to so many of the other questions I wanted. So I'll go back to what you were saying about the U.S. At the root of some of our sex education, there is this cultural shame that we have. And when you and I have spoken in the past, you mentioned that the U.S. is rather sex negative, and that we focus on the floor of sex education and not the ceiling. So what would you say is missing?
Yeah, I would say what we can get, what is politically salient, what is politically possible to get into our schools is not really even sex education. It's really pregnancy and disease education and pregnancy and disease prevention education. And
Right.
even then, it's not even the best way to prevent those things. It's often using just say no abstinence fear model in
Right.
order to achieve this public health outcome, which we all want, right? We all want fewer STIs. We all want fewer teen pregnancies. We want people to have children when they when they want to have children, we want people to control their bodies, we want people to understand boundaries and consent and prevent assault and all these things. But often, because sex education is so low on the priority list of most schools, and because people are so afraid of the politics, kind of the only thing that can get through is, hey, just say no. Here are the worst possible consequences of sex. And to me, that is the floor of what a sex education. Yes, that's important to have an all sex education done in a maybe more neutral, kind of non-judgmental way, and affirming that being in a body and being a sexual being is a wonderful, beautiful, natural, normal thing, and it comes in a wide, diverse range of colors and shapes and orientations and all that. I think that's the floor to me of what good sex education is, because when you think about sex, I think we have to be really clear about defining these things, about like what your vision is for the world, right? And I think many of us who have gone through the American sex education system, and we think about that our first sexual experiences. I can only speak for myself. Maybe if you want to chime in what yours was like, I'd love to hear. But it was terrifying. I did not know how to communicate about what felt good, what didn't feel good, what my boundaries were. I didn't feel confident. I was terrified about how I looked, how I felt, all these things. It was so much in my head because, one of the best quotes from the movie is like, the first time you're learning to use a condom should not be the first time you're having sex, right? You should have had years of practice. And it's crazy to think, we tell kids, just say no, just say no, just say no. And then 18, we're like, okay, yeah, do whatever you want. You're American, you're free. But, 18 years of that messaging is going to screw someone up. And so I think
right.
What we have to be focused on in sex education is the truth. And the truth is sex is fun, sex is beautiful, sex is pleasurable, sex is meaningful. The relationships you remember on your deathbed will be your sexual relationships, and we I think I would find it hard to argue against. Don't we want a society, a vision in which this most beautiful of acts goes as well and as positively as possible for as many people as possible? And so that's where I think the paradigm needs to shift around sex education. And it's hard, it's a challenge, but if we base curricula with that as the underlying principle, I think you could get the lower the risks of all the awful things, but it doesn't come with all the negative shame baggage that screws people up. So that's kind of what I try to hopefully tell people, but it's an uphill battle. It's hard.
Yeah, totally. And if I'm remembering a statistic that you shared in your film, A Sexplanation, the United States has the highest rate of teenage pregnancy in the industrialized world. So, we're sending kids, we're sending them off into the world in many parts of the United States without the knowledge of condom usage or how effective they are, saying abstinence only. These policies are not decreasing teen pregnancy rates.
No. Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? So if you want to against, the possibility of contracting an STD or an STI, you want to give them the education that they need in order to, go out and have a healthy sex life. And I would hope that a conversation in sex ed would talk about consent, and pleasure and all of these things, which leads me to my next question. A lot of us now who have gone through the U.S. sex education system, myself, yourself, how can we address the shame and stigma that we were raised learning through this system? I think specifically the U.S. sex education system focuses on, heteronormative PIV sex. So one, how can we take away the shame? And two, how could we expand what sex education is outside of that heteronormative scope?
Yeah, I mean, I think what rePROFilm is doing, things like social media, things like this, is a huge benefit. I think that's a big reason why queer rights, have exploded and have gained so much acceptance, because we have new distribution models like this where people can actually see a gay person and realize that what they're being told and what the reality is different. And I think that's just the first step. I think if you're looking for something to do, at this moment right now to try to combat this really, really difficult and tractable problem of cultural sexual shame, which is like, millennia, deep in far as how far it's ingrained in our culture and our society, is really to just find whatever I tell people, just the smallest, tiniest baby step you can, to find one other person in your life who you love, who you trust, who you feel you can be a little more open to,
Yes.
and together start talking about these things and start seeking out yourselves, figuring out how you learn, whatever it is you need to learn. Because I think one thing that I often get concerned about when people ask me sometimes, what should sex education curricula look like? It's like, people are so different. They come from so many different backgrounds, so many different cultures, so many different orientations and gender identities. It's hard to think of something that can work, that's a one size fit all model. But I think the one thing you can do for yourself is to find that little, baby step of courage that you can, to be open about who you are and who you love and what you're interested in, the fantasies you have, the desires you have, the things that don't work, the things you're scared of, the things you are scared to talk about. And in those kind of conversations, I've found that's where more likely than not, another person like, oh my God, I've been waiting for someone to talk about this, because we all want to talk, but we're so scared because we all have been trained from a very young age that speaking about this, you get slapped down repeatedly when you start talking about this. So finding that dialogue, the open dialogue, and then that's like, I think a lot about my coming out of the closet, like being open like this would have scared the shit out of me 20 years ago, but little by little you come out to more and more people, and then all of a sudden you're totally open and honest about things you never thought you would be. You find that people are there for you, and finding that community, I think, is big. And then I think on a political level, I think it is, like how many people, I don't know my school board members' names, all of them by name, so it's just doing that little tiny bit of like, just going to your school board website, looking at who they are, looking at some of their positions, and then thinking like, are these people who I want to be educating the next generation of Americans? And I think those two things, it's a long uphill battle, but those are two very, I think, actionable things people can do like today.
Right.
And it would start to move the culture in a way that I think that we're already going towards. We just need the school system to catch up.
Yeah. So as far as action items are concerned, finding out if sex ed is something that's legislated at a very local level, find out who your school board members are, and then maybe attending those meetings and advocating for what you would like to see in the sex ed programs that you're.
Yeah, because I've been to so many school board meetings now, and the people who show up are not the people who want sex ed. The people who show up are the people who are terrified of sex ed.
Right.
And the school board thinks that's like a big majority, because so many people show up, and they say the most just kind of vile, disgusting kind of, they're saying that, like, they're showing porn in classes, or they're, pedophiles, groomers, these horrible kind of these tropes and memes that really affect the results in your community, and it's just that little bit of a knowledge can go a long way.
Absolutely. So many images came up from my own experience in sex ed in the United States, and just so much, I think, shame, especially around, I remember menstruation. There was so much shame in the videos that we would watch around menstruation. No wonder, people very covertly passed tampons in class as their contraband or something like that. Among the other elements, right?
Yeah, we're very nervous about, and I think, what I often tell, to be honest, more progressive people have watched the film, and when they tell me, like, I don't know, like, it seems pretty young, because I advocate sex ed is something that you need from birth to death, basically, because your body's changing, your relationship changes, your desires, your needs, or wants, they all change, and the last thing you want as a parent, I think, is to be surprised by a interaction or question or something that you didn't expect because you thought your child was too young, or you have to realize that, like, I think we're talking about before, like, we are touching our genitals in utero, being in a body feels really good, and that is something that we have to just accept, that pleasure is good, pleasure is something that, but it can be difficult to navigate at times, right. You want to make sure that people understand. And so I often say, like, I'm not, when I say sex ed for younger kids, I don't mean like we need to be talking about PIV intercourse very young, but we need to be talking about like private and public. Like, touch your body all you want in private, but in public, that's not something we do. And often what happens is the kid will touch themselves in public and everyone around them will freak out because no one has taught them that.
Right.
And then they get this really searing imprinting of this idea that, like, oh, when I touch myself, the world hates me. Which is so scary when you're young, and that's some of the first sex ed we all get, right?
Yeah.
We don't talk about give the proper names for genitals, clitoris, vulva, testicles, penis. We give them weird names, or we get freaked out when people say those names. It's just slowly building these tiny building blocks that, when often a little bit before a kid needs to actually use the information, right? Because again, you don't want to give them the information when they need, at the moment they need it. We want to give them the information before they need it.
Right.
And I think it's important that we just, the other thing I was thinking is honestly, like, not only is your kid probably already questioning and already wants to know the answer to these things and desperate for an adult to talk to them about it, it's actually like a very beautiful bonding moment, I think, for parents and children to have these kind of discussions, because you get to know each other and feel safe in a way that I think most people don't have in their childhoods. At least I didn't.
100%. I remember, actually, my dad, kudos to him, when we had I'll divulge this, when we had our sex ed conversation between the two of us, he told me about different kinds of condoms and how, like, these are made for female pleasure.
Oh, that's great.
And I was like, Dad, so progressive of you. Even come into the conversation. But I'm really glad that he did so. And to your point about, from a young age, you can teach a child the names for their body parts. For example, if we can't say the word vagina, if we can't say the word penis, then I don't think as adults we can have a real nuanced conversation about those things. I think it starts super young. A lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know how to pronounce the word clitoris until I was in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
Good luck navigating even where it is. It's outside of my. So if we don't talk about it, that shame just continues to snowball.
Yeah. And I think, I try to put people, like, in the moment of a sex act, right? What you want for yourself, for everyone else, is to be able to, in that moment, advocate for themselves. That's the only way you can start to build the boundaries you need for, like, a real safe, trusting love. Like, sex is best when people fully trust each other and let go.
Right.
And you can't have that if you're not able to communicate all the things that are going on in your mind, because a lot of things go on in your mind during sex. And so, just exactly to your point, I couldn't have said it better. If a child cannot say the word penis and vagina, how do you expect them to advocate for all the complicated, nuanced boundaries that they'll need to establish later in life?
Totally. Yeah. Okay, so my last question for you, this is something that was really interesting when we were speaking previously. So you were speaking to me about how porn is a subject that doesn't get a lot of real nuanced critical attention, and that you think that it hasn't undergone the reckoning that the rest of the entertainment industry has. So what would that, if we were to have that moment?
Yeah, so right now it's called kind of like porn literacy, but that term, I think, is just it's too much for people to, and I get, like, in Idaho, basically the state of Idaho tried to introduce porn literacy into their curricula, but it just got, like, the worst kind of, like, backlash possible, because it does sound like you're teaching porn in class. Like, I get it. but the idea, the concept, the educational principle behind that is that, one, porn is ubiquitous. It is everywhere, and you will come across it somehow, and a child will probably come across it much earlier than they are able to understand and comprehend exactly what they're viewing. And you do not want a child to see that before they've had a talk about porn,
right?
Because then what's going to happen is that kid will think that this is what sex should be, this is what sex should look like, and porn is a form of entertainment. It's like watching a superhero movie. It's like watching Fast and the Furious. It is not real life. It is a fantasy. these are not real life situations, but because there's so little sex education in the United States, I know I turned to porn to get my basic questions answered, which were like, just what does it look like? How does it feel? Like, you hear these words and terms and acts in school, but you have no basis to understand what they are. So you turn to whatever you can to try to understand. And then that's porn.
Right.
And I think, we need to basically have a very clear discussion very early that porn is just like seeing a movie, right? I think that the kind of analogy that's often bandied around is like, we don't teach kids how to drive by watching Fast and the Furious movies. And kids should not learn about sex through pornography. And I think a big problem that we have, and maybe it's a better term, I think, is like just media criticism or like media literacy.
Right.
And thinking of porn within that umbrella of media, because that's what it is. Like before making the movie, I did like bucket porn into like this separate special class of media or entertainment, but it is kind of just in the spectrum of entertainment. It's like what we watch to relax and get the same kind of thrills you get from like a murder show or something, right? It's just in a different part. But I think the porn industry, like you're alluding to, has not gone through the same reckoning that Hollywood is now, right? When it comes to gender diversity, when it comes to body diversity, when it comes to racial diversity, when it comes to sexuality, gender, all these different things, and it hasn't come to terms with the kind of messages it's sending in terms of like, especially around gender roles. There's definitely, I can think of maybe like 2 or 3 women behind the camera who make porn, and it's all men making porn, basically. You see that porn performers aren't unionized, so you have really exploitative practices in terms of what they're forced to do, required to do, and I think we just have to be clear, just like we understand now movies, just like when you watch, it's hard to watch Breakfast at Tiffany's, right? Because of, because of kind of like the yellow face in that movie.
Right.
And we have this understanding and we talk about it, parents will talk about their kids, this is a year past, this is kind of a retrograde idea of race or gender, whatever it is, but no one is having these conversations about porn.
Right.
And that concerns me because, I think I have a lot of sympathy for kids who think that porn should be what it looks like, and they're just reenacting kind of these fantasies that they have no real basis of understanding to be able to form. It's not about connection in porn, right? It's not about, never in porn do you hear beforehand like a negotiation of a person's boundaries, stopping to take breaks and use lube. It's no one ever utters a safe word. Like all these things that they're actually doing when they're making the porn.
Right.
But you think that this is how every 20-minute sexual interaction has to follow this script. And that's just not a recipe for a real truly fulfilling, and it took me decades to probably realize this, of what sex can actually be. So I think in some ways, I think porn is like kind of the perfect in to talk to people about this stuff, because often it's too scary and nerve-wracking to talk to your child about your sex life or their sexual feelings or whatever it is, but you can talk about this idea, of porn and what it is and I think for better or worse, porn will always be there. We've loved watching people have sex since we've been painting on cave walls. So I think it's something we really need to figure out how to talk constructively about it, because the alternative, which we have now, is like a kind of wild, wild west where parents have no idea what kids are watching and kids have no idea what they're watching. So yeah, that's my big concern about porn.
Yeah, it seems like it's really twofold. It's how do we first, change the sex ed system so that it reflects healthier images of sexuality and, consent and all these things. And also, could porn have a reckoning and become a little bit more representative of what many people want? As it stands, I think that you know, some parts of it can be really fun, some parts of it can really, uh, I think, create scary or dangerous situations for people because that's all that they're exposed to is what sex should be.
Yeah, and they don't see the like I am all for, you know, if everyone is consenting to kind of an S&M
Right,
situation, and
right.
but when you talk to people who are into S&M, like they're some of the most open communicative people I've ever met about these
Yeah,
things. They
truly.
know every single boundary. They can talk about every single body part. They can talk about every situation. They know how to stop. They know when to their communication skills are so on point. And porn doesn't show that, if you want to, a very simple idea is like, if this is something that fascinates you, like you have to communicate with all parties involved over and over and over again about what is right, what will feel good. It's not, it's something. And I think often what happens is in a sexual encounter, people are are reenacting these porn scenarios, and both parties actually are not really into it. They just think that's what the script they need to follow to be a good
Sure.
person at sex,
Well,
um
sex can be vulnerable and super intimate, and
yeah,
you want to please the person that you're with and you want to have a good time. And sometimes it can be difficult to have a conversation around those things. But that's
it is difficult. And I think yeah, when it comes to porn, I think it's like, just like we have conversations now, like I'm sure parents are having conversations with their kids about the choices their children make about media.
right.
Like we should really think about it, because I think often when we seek out porn, we're kind of letting the algorithm choose for us,
Mm,
um and I think to be really intentional about the porn you watch and the porn you support, and the creators you support, is something that, because we're so scared to talk about sex, as a conversation we're not really having.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to a day when all of those things come to pass, hopefully in the
I mean, it would be great. I
yeah,
mean, I'm kind of saying this in jest, but like, I think a great starter for a lot of people is like, like your friend, whatever, like maybe talk about the porn you watch and talk about how it makes you feel. If it makes you scared, if it makes you disgusted, if it makes you worried, if, if you're not able to talk about the thing that, often we need a lot of little baby steps to get to that brave step where we can be open and honest about ourselves. Talk about that thing in the media, talk about that movie, talk about the porn, talk about all these different things, just to get a little more comfortable with saying the words and talking about it, and finding that the people who are safe to talk about those things. If you don't want to dive right in too fast with someone you just met, you need to, and people who aren't safe, but whatever you can do to kind of talk about all the, lots and lots of questions we probably all already have, and will always have as we age. Just the more we can talk about it, the better.
totally. Yeah. So just, I guess to wrap up, I would say the things that I've taken away from our conversation today are, if you want to start to change sex ed for your child or in your local area, you can go to their school board meetings because sex ed is legislated on a hyper local level. If we were to take things to the next level, porn literacy, media criticism are great ways to do so. And then also, having a safe space if you want to start to dismantle any of the shame that we were raised with in the US sex education system, finding a safe person to talk to about what you like, and then, kind of going from there.
Yeah, and again, I'm seriously, the littlest baby step you can. Like, if
Yeah.
it requires just like looking in the mirror and saying masturbation, clitoris, penis. Like sometimes it's just hard to say the word. I get it. Like just find that space, that whatever, the safest space you can, and just say it, or just get practice with it, because believe me, it takes time. It doesn't happen right away. It's really hard to let go of shame, but if you work at it little by little in the smallest way you can, you'll be amazed how in 5-10 years how your life has changed.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Alex. Is there anything else that you want to say before you go, or anything you want to tell us about your film?
Oh no, if you're interested in seeing the film where I kind of go from a totally, at 36, unable to deal with sexual shame, to now talking on an Instagram live about sex in all its shapes and forms, oh yeah, you can go to asexplanation.com and you can find out where to see the film in your part of the world.
Amazing. I will also tag it in the repost of this video so that you can access it. But thank you so much again, Alex Liu. This was a great
Oh,
conversation.
thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
All right, bye.
Bye.